Okay, now what we're doing is we're going to prepare our beams from the first stage of the seasoned birch that's sitting here. Now this has only been drying for about a month and a half. So this stuff will have to be cut, put, and piled and weighted, and usually with a fan on it, so that it will season out enough that when we do cut it in the boards to make the beams, it won't warp on you. So we'll fire up the saw and we'll saw off a few boards. This would be the seasoned component. Beautiful, nice wood, but it still has dampness in it. And we can't use that yet, but we'll go through that component of making them. Now what I've done here is I've cut 4 beams on a 3/4 inch setting. The trick to this, cutting this green or semi-seasoned birch, is that there are a special resaw tooth. The resaw tooth is only 3 teeth per inch, has quite a set. So now we've got 4 boards cut, and we'll have to put these to season a little bit more because there's some moisture in them. The trick to cutting this stuff easily on the bandsaw is the resaw blades are 3 teeth per inch with quite a bit of a set in them so that they don't bind up and they can make a true cut with this rail. So now we're going to take similar boards that have already been 100% seasoned, and we're going to bring in our template. Now these ones have been cut and they're about 6 months old. What we're going to do is take our templates. Now this template is for multiple patterns. You can see there's all kinds of little markings on it. But primarily what we want is consistency in the shape for all 4 beams. So all I'm going to do is trace them out to minimize the wood that we have to sand and plane to have a finished beam. Now the beams, if you don't have access to seasoned birch, they can be made from old discarded hardwood flooring, birch, maple, doesn't matter. And also, a lot of people are particular in that they want juniper beams, tamarack. The same principle will hold with that. You'd have to take the logs and season it. You'd have to cut them in boards like this, and then you'd have to plane them down and use your templates all over. Now an example of the seasoning juniper is over here in the shelf to the left. Why a lot of people prefer it is because it has significant grains in different colors. And as it seasons out, you can see from here, this brown in the birch is not a seasoned grain. The brown in the birch is the first stages of the rot of the wood. But the brown in the juniper is the prime dried wood with the different colors. So people will take this one as preference simply because this is just pure white wood. Same strength. It takes a little bit longer to season the juniper simply because of the amount of sap in them as opposed to the birch. So now that we've got these templates marked out, we're going to go back to the bandsaw and we're going to get rid of this wastage before we set up the plane down one surface to get our right thickness, and then we'll get them ready to router up. So now we're ready to trim off our beams that we've just marked from the rough seasoned stock. Okay, now that we've got these cut, we're going to take them back to the planer and get one true edge on them so that we can see if we need to take any little bit more of the excess wood off with the saw before we plane the second surface. Okay, so here we go. Now why I gave them that last pass through is just to ensure that they're all one good side, uniform thickness. Now I need to check against my measurements for a full crossbeam, and it's just a little bit around 3/4 or less. So they're a little bit too big, but it's not enough that I got to pass them through the saw again. I can usually achieve everything with 2 passes of the planer. Now that we've got the 2 outside surfaces done, you'll notice on these edges here, you can still see the saw marks, which are a little bit rough. Now, if we were to take this wood and pass it through the router to get the nice finished edge, the router would follow all these little dimples. So what we got to do with these is just give them a light brush on the belt sander, and then we can take the router in and position the corners so that we're ready to mortise them in. Okay, right now we're going to do the rough edges on the sides of the beams, and I've got a 120 grit belt so that I don't leave any coarse lines in it. Now we've got 4 good surfaces, so what we'll do is we'll set the router up to give us those nice rounded edges before we can actually fit them to the frame and do the final cutting if we're ready for the mortising. Okay, now what we're going to do is we have a 1/4 radius router bit, and we're going to do all the rounded edges on these 4 beams. Now you can see we have nice rounded corners, and that's important with respect to the twine that actually goes in the snowshoes, because if that was a square corner on a hardwood, it almost acts like a knife and it will prematurely chafe all your strings off. So smooth corners, same thing with the holes we're going to drill. They need to be taken out just a little bit so the string is not pulling against that 90-degree hardwood. This will season and this will be very, very hard. Okay, what we're doing here is a pretty simple little task. I've got a hot iron with my handcraft bye, and what I normally do is I burn my beams before I do the finished sanding on them, and it takes care of any burnt edges. And what you will find is that in a snowshoe like these, the brand is always on the bottom. Nobody wants that in their face when they're walking on snowshoes. So this one's been preheating for about 20 minutes. I'll just check and make sure I got the lettering right. Now I'm going to put a lot of downward pressure, but I'm going to roll it a little bit because the actual brand surface is a little bit concave. And then I'll do it tip to the ends, have a little sneak peek. So you'll see that the burn has yellowed some of the wood, but it's down deep enough now that I can lightly sand that when I do the finish in the routering, and you'll just have some nice black lettering without any of the burn, similar to this one here that's already been sanded before we put the cords in it. I'll just do another one here. There we go. That's very hot, so make sure you've got a metal surface if you're on any wooden benches or things, because that will fuse in pretty quick.